What's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
You found our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. We'd appreciate that.
Also, if you like sports, check out the podcast, Haberman and Middlecoff. We had a radio show. Now we have a podcast. We've been together for what, about almost a decade?
Professionally or?
Professionally.
Yeah. That's about what I'd say.
Going strong. Yeah.
Sometimes it feels longer than other times. Like this situation and like Todd Gurley's time with the Rams. I mean, it's over. I'm not a good snapper, but it's over. Todd Gurley with the Rams, John. He's going to cost him $20 million in dead cap this year, but he's not going to play a snap for him. It's pretty wild that we've arrived at this place. Although I don't know, even a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it seemed like this is where it might be headed. But it's still pretty crazy to be in this position given how dominant he was not that long ago.
It's become a hot button issue in the sport of football about paying running backs. I do put Todd Gurley somewhat in his own class in the sense of this guy. When he was drafted really high, was the 10th overall pick, they drafted him with a torn ACL, right? He was not a perfect prospect. It actually, if we look back, it speaks to how great of a prospect he really was.
Right.
Like, what would he have been with a healthy ACL? A top 3 or 4 pick, maybe. He was like a state champion as a track guy. He was at Georgia, incredible. And it did, honestly, it wasn't even that weird when they pulled the trigger. And then to me, I didn't think he looked great early on in his career, but when Sean McVay got there, it was just the ultimate marriage. It was honestly, Guy, a little bit like Kyle Shanahan, Matt Ryan. They were just made for each other. But the knee thing came back to haunt him. And by the time that it did come back to haunt him, they had kind of gotten aggressive and they had paid him. And his contract extension, I didn't know this until he got cut and reading some of the information, had not even started.
Joel Corey says that Todd Gurley didn't play any of the new years in his Rams extension. This is what you're talking about. He was scheduled to make $11.9 in the last 2 years of his rookie deal. He gets the $34.5 million from the extension, 2.5 with an offset, which is $22 million more than paying out his rookie contract.
Let's look at and just talk about, I actually do think the league is littered with a lot of superstar running backs, right? We all know fantasy football is huge. They're always the top picks. It's a league full of studs. We just saw one that looks like a Greek god basically carry his team to the AFC Championship game. Back-to-back games of 180 plus on the road in the playoffs, destroying people. To me, where it gets weird with Derrick Henry is not that he's not a great back. He's currently, as we're recording this, as a franchise player. I wouldn't be comfortable paying him $45, $50 million like Zeke got, and I would imagine that's what he's looking at and wanting because he doesn't catch the ball. And there is, to me, a clear line of delineation when you deal with these guys. In 2020, you got to be an elite pass catcher, Guy. That's where I think Derrick Henry is going to be potentially on a cycle of just year by year. Now, it's still going to be, if he's healthy, he can bank some cash, right? He'll get $12 million, and then if you get franchise back-to-back year, that second year is 100% of the value, so you're the highest paid guy. You could make some money, but it's risky. Where I think Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey, I just looked it up. Derrick Henry, 87 career catches in 4 years. Alvin Kamara has caught 81 balls on the dot all 3 years.
Wow.
I'm not a math
He's
major,
like the Chris Davis, A's slugger Chris Davis, who hit like 242 3 years in a row, I think?
I thought it was 249.
249? Yeah, it was one of the two. And then it was lower last year.
So 81 times 3 is 243. Christian McCaffrey is on even another level than Alvin. Now, I think if you were really, like we were getting into an argument, Michael Thomas takes a lot of catches in New Orleans, where McCaffrey is he's their best receiver and he's their best pass catcher, especially now, no Greg Olsen. He has 303 catches, Guy, in 3 years. So McCaffrey is currently averaging 101 catches a season through 3 years. Because I think at the end of the day, where Derrick Henry could not do this, if you got into a position where you only had 2 wide receivers healthy going into a playoff game or going into a big game in December, McCaffrey and Kamara could just be Julian Edelman, right? Be just operate like Antonio Brown in the slot and just play that position where Derrick Henry cannot. And I'd even say Zeke, he's already been paid. He's a good pass catcher out of the backfield, but he's not, you wouldn't just flex him out at this point in time. He's not quite as quick. He's a little slower. His value is really just to be a bell cow. He's like the better, more complete version of Derrick Henry.
So a few things I'm going to throw at you here, John, as it relates to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, and I remember I tweeted this out at one point during this last football season, that he had surpassed his rushing attempt number in the NFL in the same amount of games as he had his last year at Alabama, because they play a lot of games at Alabama. If you're aware
like 15.
Of this. Yeah. They played 15 games. Derrick Henry, his junior year at Alabama, he had 395 rushing attempts
in a season.
395. McCaffrey's high was his second year at Stanford. He was 337. He was banged up his junior year. It was much lower, but still not low. It was 250. Do you know where Derrick Henry ranks among the top 10 rushers in the NFL last year in age? Top 10 rushers NFL last year in age. Where do you think he ranks?
He's the oldest one.
Close. Second oldest. Only Chris Carson's older. He turned 25 on January 4th, Derrick Henry.
So it's a young group.
It's a young group. Like if you look at the top rushers in the NFL, I have to go to Mark Ingram at 14 to find the first 30-year-old. If I look at the top receivers last year in the NFL, that was by rushing yards. I'll go to receptions. By receptions, Edelman, 33, was 5th. Julio Jones was 6th. He's 30. Travis Kelce was 8th. He's 30. So, and just the general age, Michael Thomas is 26. That's older than any of the top 10 running backs, and he's the number one receiver in terms of receptions last year.
Was George Kittle, played in college for 4 years, been in the league now, going into his 4th. I bet he's 26 years old.
He is.
So here's the thing, guy. What's unfair for running backs, if I told you that Michael Thomas or George Kittle or Julio Jones in 2020, knock on wood, the season happens, got 200 targets, which would be, let's say, 250 targets, and they caught, 120 balls or whatever. You'd be like, hell yeah, feed the beast. We don't even think about it. Like, the higher the target number, it's like a point of pride. Like, we throw at this guy all the time because he's unstoppable, right? Where at running back in the NFL, when you start going, God, he had 300 carries, it's a negative. And it's why you see the wide receiver money keep getting outrageous and outrageous. And the running back money, if it wasn't for Jerry Jones, the number would be relatively small. I mean, guy, we're recording this. Melvin Gordon does not have a team. Now, is Melvin Gordon some superstar? No. Is he a legitimate NFL starting running back that you can go to the playoffs with and throw it to and hand the ball off to 250 times? Yes. People will not hire him, partly because I'm sure he's going, I want $30 million guaranteed. No one's going to pay that. So I don't really know what happens. I think it's going to be fascinating with Kamara and McCaffrey because they're going to have a hybrid argument, right? They're going to have the look at my pass catching numbers, and that they're going to, you can tag me as a running back, and Kamara's actually, because Christian McCaffrey was a first-round pick, so they're both going into their 4th year. You can always put the 5th-year option. Kamara's going into the last year of his deal. Is you're going to tag him as a running back, which you can. He is a running back, but when you're negotiating with him, I think it does get a little complicated, right? Because of his pass catching value.
Well, remember, the Saints were the team that made sure when they went to an arbiter that Jimmy Graham was a tight end, not a receiver, even though he was split out like all the time.
If you were Alvin Kamara, could you sign for anything less if you were a free agent than Zeke got?
If you're a true free agent?
Yeah.
Not if you're a true free agent.
And aren't they going to have to tag him?
Yeah.
So it's going to be complicated. I think it's going to be really complicated for both these guys.
Well, what about McCaffrey, right? The third person ever to 1,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards.
Is there a chance that one of those two players does not get a contract extension on their current team and they're on a different team?
Which would be more likely? Kamara? to not be on that team?
Well, as great as he is, and he's dominated since coming in the league, there was a point in time in 2019, probably halfway through the season, I thought, this guy could be the MVP of the league, Christian McCaffrey. Matt Rule did not draft him, and he's kind of going Jimmy Johnson on this whole operation, where at least Kamara is Peyton's guy. He used, like, that's their kind of their operation. Him and Michael Thomas make the thing go. Could you trade Christian McCaffrey for maybe like a first and a second round pick and just kind of start over, which they're already kind of doing? If I'm McCaffrey, I might broach the conversation this offseason. Are you guys interested in keeping me long term, or should you just move me now and let's move on with ourselves? Right?
To the Los Angeles Chargers? Yeah, I mean, would they, given that the administration's different, would they have to get a better first round pick than they used on him?
Yeah, I don't think they would, though, because
you don't think they'd get a better pick.
Well, they used the 8th pick on Christian McCaffrey, and a team in the top 7 is not a running back hybrid away. But I do think they could easily get like a team's picks, like an Odell Beckham type haul, but better, like 17. Like, you give me your first and second rounder. Now, this is where it would be, is anyone doing that for a running back and then paying him? It gets complicated, right? Are they just both better off just paying the players?
Yeah, I mean, the time to do that would be right now. Now, this year or next year, right?
I think for Christian McCaffrey, you could argue, given that he's still cheap and you don't even need to pay him this year, there's never been a better time to trade him if you're not into extending him. And that's the key guy into all these moves that turn out shitty, like when Clowney goes for that, or when the Raiders have to trade back. Once you know, you pull the trigger before the draft.
The Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, pick to take a star in. Well, they drafted a running back in the first round, but he's a hybrid. Then you could get both of them.
Gruden. Okay, something to chew on. You know, I think because I think McCaffrey's going to be good, I think it's really interesting. Like, on one hand, you could tell the Panthers and Matt Rule, like, guys, people don't just luck into players like this. He's sitting here for you. Keep him. But are they going to be ready in 2 years? Maybe. It can happen fast in the NFL, but
it does feel like they're taking a pretty strong, hard line of just starting over and accumulating picks.
I wouldn't mind seeing him on a good team, John, someone that we can watch.
Is there a chance that Christian McCaffrey's traded before Alvin Kamara ever does get – like, to me, Alvin Kamara probably isn't going anywhere. Now, it could get ugly because, like you said, the Saints do have a history of it's – I mean, Drew Brees always signs his contracts. Everyone else kind of fighting tooth and nail.
Yeah, but fighting tooth and nail is different than getting traded. Like, if you're talking about getting traded, that's different than holding out, whatever, all that other stuff. Right?
But I think
and eventually being back on that team.
People forget how dominant Jimmy Graham was when they were arguing, right? He was kicking ass for them. Now, I think if we dove in when they traded him, they had hit on hard times a little bit defensively, so they needed to kind of replenish. I think with Kamara, they are humming. Like, they're one of the best
offensive linemen.
Yeah. They needed a center. Their center retired.
Max.
To me, McCaffrey is just...
It's interesting.
Until they get like Trevor Lawrence or something, everything's on the table with the Panthers, right?
Derrick Henry should have tagged Tannehill. And
no, I think you go year by year because he is a great player.
All right.
He led the league in rushing, right?
Yeah.
When you said, yeah. And he missed a game, remember?
And was just like, not just the numbers guy, but you watched him and you went.
He was sweet.
That's greatness.
I still love running backs guy.
By the way, speaking of, I had Gurley's stats up. Field Yates, we'll finish with a tweet from him on Gurley. In 5 years with the Rams, he was second in the NFL in rushing. 5,405 yards. And again, like you said, he had 14 touchdowns last year, 12 rushing, 2 receiving, I believe, on a year that he wasn't his old self. Anyway, 5 seasons, 5,400 yards, first in the NFL in that span with 58 touchdowns, second in the NFL in yards from scrimmage, almost 7,500 yards from scrimmage, and an NFL best 70 total touchdowns.
Wow. You're right. When you just look at the .com page, it doesn't look as bad as the vibe we got out of Ramland for the last 12 months, right?
Yeah, because like
Goal line carries and
Yeah,
stuff.
part of it was just like Derrick Henry. You knew what it looked like. Like, I know when I watch Derrick Henry, there's not a number you can tell me that he has that is more impressive than just watching him. And with Gurley, like, you knew what it looked like when he was at his best. Now we're past
Phone call on YouTube.
Huh?
Could you hear that? My phone just ringing.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, good. It's good.
Even if I could, so what? Subscribe.
Subscribe.